Did you go through the white paper? Did you read it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I kind of have spent most of yesterday and today kind of dissecting, playing with the code a little bit too, which has been good. You know, on it, they've been working on it for a while, obviously, because I think at least for a year, and they've got at least a pretty decent team. I think they have pulled together some really great ideas from the space. Like, I think their consensus mechanism is an interesting take. I thought that maybe they would go with something like Tendermint's consensus, which I was actually kind of hoping for, because
Yeah.
I tweeted yesterday that it would be super interesting if Binance's DEX, which is based on Tendermint, was compatible with Libra. So that'd be an interesting angle. I mean, not that you couldn't do it, but it makes it a lot easier when you're using the same consensus mechanism and same kind of core building blocks.
So did anything kind of stand out to you when you read it?
I think the big thing was just, I mean, one of the things that a lot of people have been kind of harping on is right now the initial, the people that are able to run validators and the high price to pay to get there. I get why they did it, because I think like you do kind of want to start with those big multinationals that have the influence. So I think the one, we've been looking at a lot of stablecoins and working with quite a few, like Trust Token and Paxos and Stably, and we support more than anybody on our platforms. We've been kind of going pretty deep in this space because I think our belief is that stablecoins are going to be the next generation of adoption for cryptocurrency. And the reason being is purely because they remove the volatility. Like, you remove the volatility, but get the benefits of crypto in terms of ideally, right? Like, and I realize that when it's collateralized one for one, it's not truly censorship resistant, and all that stuff. But you get a lot of the benefits of programmable money, easier auditability, lower cost payments, like all that sort of stuff, which is a huge win for people around the world, but especially in countries where their financial system isn't as good as ours. I mean, that's kind of what got me into the space, is being exposed to people in Venezuela and Argentina, and one of our employees is still down there, and in Ukraine and Nigeria and all over, and you realize that their financial systems are pretty messed up, and that they're paying like massive premiums to be able to participate in the global economy, and it's keeping them sort of at this generation or this wealth gap between like have and have not nations. It's impossible to get over it when you're paying like upwards of like 5x to get access to US dollars just to do international trade. Like, that's just insane. You can't compete globally. So I think in that respect, I'm really excited to see where Libra goes, because obviously they have the network behind it, and I think that could really help level the playing field. But I think the big challenge that they're going to face, obviously, is regulatory. And so I think it's smart that they, you and Mauricio touched on it a bit yesterday, I think. Having the leverage of those big multinationals might make it so that it's like a juggernaut that can't really be shut down, because some of those companies are just so big and so important to the global economy now that even if people want to shut it down, they like, what are they going to do? Maybe like ban it, make it illegal. I mean, at that point, you might have companies that just say, screw it, you can't, too bad. Which is a really interesting, I mean, it's an exciting time to be alive. It's really interesting. Like, you might see a point in time where you
think Facebook's going to pull an Uber?
It sort of kind of seems like that. But the interesting thing, at least, like, they've kind of set it up in a way so far where Facebook's reaches are, I think, more limited than people were expecting, which is smart. Obviously, there's still a lot of, they have their tendrils into it, for sure. I mean, even right before I jumped on the podcast, I was looking at who some of the backers are and realized that Zuckerberg's on the board of one of the VC backers. I was like, okay, well, there's yet another foothold into another vote, right?
Yeah, so, plus also they have 2/3 validator collusion. It's a cartel of validators. Nothing stopping them coming together. But like, all right, this is a new consensus, or whitelist this address, blacklist that address, and they can reverse any transactions too.
Yeah, big time. Which I think, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, I think it depends on how it ends up getting used, and that's sort of the problem with a lot of stuff, right? Is like one of the challenges with Bitcoin payments in terms of usability is the fact that you can't reverse it. I mean, you can refund, and we do that with our payments platform, but it's still it's a challenge, right? Like, there's people, if you look at credit card payments, the fact that you can do chargebacks is good for the consumer when you're getting screwed by the vendor, but there's also a lot of people that abuse that, and then vendors get screwed. So I think, like, I'd like to, and people have been trying to tackle that stuff with smart contracts and interesting things around like time-based escrow, but I think it's kind of a bit of both. Like, you do kind of need the ability to do to potentially reverse malicious transactions, I think. But it definitely, the fact, like, who's involved, I think makes it both very interesting, but also a little bit scary, in the sense that, like, as individuals, doesn't feel like there's a whole lot we can really do outside of choose not to adoption.
I have a saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So we can take these heuristics and look at what Facebook has been doing and how they've been behaving. And so for me, it's like, okay, especially as of late, I'm like, if that's your behavior and you really don't care about the end user, as it seems, your actions speak louder than your words for anything. Now you're going to know what I'm buying. You're going to know what I'm selling. You're going to know my transaction history. What's going to happen with the political environment where I was talking with Ann the other day about this, where it's like, okay, now the political parties I'm donating to if I use Libra. It's like, no, you shouldn't have that information. You shouldn't know who I'm donating to. You shouldn't know who I'm supporting, unless I raise my hand and say yes. You can have my permission to know who I give money to.
Yeah, the opt-in effect. I mean, the interesting thing, or I guess like playing devil's advocate, is that Visa and MasterCard, those ones, they already do kind of know, right? I mean,
yeah, that's why I use privacy.com. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Yeah, I fucking love privacy.com. They kick ass.
Yeah, but I think, like, people in the crypto space are still the very vocal minority. Most people, I mean, I've said this to a few people before. I'm like, most people don't give a shit about their privacy until something bad happens. It's like,
no, they don't until it happens.
Yeah, I mean, you take it for granted, and it's the same thing with money. I mean, people have done the same thing. Like, people in Venezuela didn't expect.
Or even here, like, if you're looking at a high prosperity place like Hong Kong, you had 2 million people marching the other day. Majority of people went to the train station with cash. They didn't want to use WeChat or any of the payment option due to identification, because they don't want to tell the government that I was part of this political movement to say no. It was huge. Like, everyone wanted to use cash.
Yeah, and that's where it gets super crazy, is like the surveillance state in China. I mean, and the interesting thing is that there are people that are actually for it. I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing, is that, like, some people, I mean, because there are definite efficiency gains that come out of it, but yeah, it's definitely Orwellian, that's for sure. And it's you kind of look at how that could be happening on a global scale. It's a little bit crazy.
But how do you see Libra in relationship to? Because to me, I don't specifically see Libra as an adversary against the crypto community, because to me, it's not a crypto. To me, it's just another payment token used by, national corporations, kind of like Alipay. In fact, one of my theses is they created this to go against Alipay. Alipay is a huge threat towards Facebook because Alipay is massive in Africa and India, and Facebook's been trying to get penetration and saturation with Facebook in those places. But for me, it's like I'm more curious, for me, I'm on the Web3 side. I want a new Web3. I care about privacy. I care about tools. there's a maxim, like, we can't change human nature. If you look at history, at one point in time, governments always turn on their citizen. Always. There's always some type
Yeah,
of
sadly.
there's always some type of issue. Like, there's always something going on where you have a government who is causing some issues to some group of people within a nation. And for me, it's like, we can't change that unless we change the whole government structure. Hopefully that's where we're going headed to. I think, Owen E. Wilson, a very famous biologist, has the best saying: we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies. And
Yeah.
we're still in the kings and queens era. Like, you look at the first lady, what, like, and the president, like, two people. Like, we need a person to run 300 million people. Like, and hopefully my overall vision is we revert back to more decentralized government, city states, more smaller variable power plays, that we can create game theoretical models that everyone puts checks and bounds, kind of like Switzerland is, kind of loosely. But going back to crypto is, how do you see crypto responding to this?
Well, I think at at the very minimum, this is definitely, if crypto wasn't already enough on the main stage the last little bit, with some of the good stuff and bad stuff, this has definitely woken a lot of people up around
Mm.
that you know cryptocurrencies in some fashion, whatever form they take, um, are here to stay. Like, that genie's out of the bottle, and Satoshi kicked it off, right? And it's not going back. So I think I think it also, like, to your point around whether Libra is a cryptocurrency. I personally think it is, but it also depends on, like, how you define it, right? I mean, if you're looking at cryptocurrencies as decentralized and censorship resistant, it's definitely not that. Not even close, right? But I think
At
it
least
does
for me
employ.
personally, that's how I view a cryptocurrency. It has to be censorship resistant, or more or less. Why am I even using a blockchain? I'll use a DLT, cheaper, faster,
Yeah,
easier. Digital currency. See you later.
yeah. I guess maybe the way that I kind of mix and match those, or interchange those words quite a bit, digital currency and cryptocurrency. But I use the way I look at it is maybe more technical in that sense, where it's like, uh, does it use cryptography for signing things and making um, transactions secure? So I think, to me, it is, but there's a huge spectrum of cryptocurrencies out there. A lot of them that are totally useless, and some of them that are super interesting. Like, I think Bitcoin is a really interesting one, but in terms of, the way we've been thinking about stablecoins, um, and adoption of crypto, we've been it was we were kind of talking about right before we jumped on, was you know I think there's a lot of, the volatility is a huge barrier for people. So I think, like, some of the big problems we've had in the space in terms of mainstream adoption. I mean, I think a lot of people have been really focused on speed and, like, cost and all this sort of stuff. And my argument has been, like, blockchain's already great. It just depends on the context. You
Mm-hmm.
compare Bitcoin to a wire transfer, it looks fucking awesome. I mean,
Yep.
it's amazing, incredible, right? And that's the slowest, most expensive cryptocurrency to send stuff around,
I'm
right?
still waiting for a fucking wire transfer 6 days now from a bank.
Yeah, well, and there's serious issues,
Fuck.
like, there's serious issues around wire fraud and stuff like that. Like, we haven't been a victim of wire fraud, but we've had issues where we've had trouble getting wires to, Australia, for example, and we don't find out for 2 3 weeks, and you're constantly calling the other party to be like, hey, did you get it,
Mm-hmm.
did you get it? So there's just implied trust. And if somebody was actually doing wire fraud, by the time you've done a trace and, like, get the money back, or don't get it back and find out that they took off with the money, it's like 3 weeks later, they're
Mm-hmm.
already gone, man. So, like, Bitcoin looks pretty amazing from that perspective, because I can send something, um, and frankly, any crypto almost looks better, way better, because I can send any amount of money to anywhere in the world for, maybe a couple bucks tops for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a couple hours for me to be, like, 100% secure that it's going to be there. And I think the biggest thing is, like, I get visibility that the other person received it. So, you can't do that with wires right now, which is kind of insane. So I
So what do you
think
see like Libra with the other payment tokens? Because in the space you have like Ripple and you have all these other so-called payment tokens. To me, from Occam's razor perspective and what Facebook represents and who they are and the network of corporations they brought in, I'm like, to me the other payment tokens are moot almost.
yeah, I'd say so. I think it's a race to adoption, right? So it's like who's going to get the most adoption. And I've always been a little bit more interested in Stellar versus Ripple because they're
Mm.
actually really similar. Like
They're
Stellar's kind
similar,
of,
yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
mean, Jed, left. There's whatever, some disagreements, and I wasn't around in the space at that time, so I'm coming in late and like reading history. But they are really similar mechanics, but I think the big difference is that there are some concrete differences around the consensus mechanism, but I think the big thing is like Ripple put more of an emphasis on institutions, which is kind of where Facebook has been going right now, right? And Stellar put more emphasis on kind of letting anybody be able
Hmm.
to be a Stellar anchor and run nodes. The challenge I think with Stellar is like IBM. You look at their network, and like IBM controls a lot of it right now. So, and they've been having a tougher time getting adoption. So I think I've been kind of a fan of Stellar and how they've gone about things and where they're looking. I mean, we were looking at kind of adopting, but we wanted to see um, kind of how things play out with Libra. And I think, yeah, I think they should be kind of worried because the power that is behind and the momentum probably behind
Yeah.
Libra, but they're
My only
also quite a bit behind, right? Like,
Yeah, they are. We're like, we don't know. The white paper is a white paper. They have testnet. Who knows how mainnet's going to be? I have no idea what the finished product will be.
well,
Um,
and even when you look at the code, like right now, it's like core code with CLI. So we're looking at maybe
yeah,
integrating and playing with Libra on testnet to see how it would work. But we're gonna have to build our own, you know, uh, wrappers for the RPC.
I'm more interested in the network effect of is anybody allowed to do they do they create a permissionless system where anyone can plug and play,
Well,
or
apparently
is it?
5 years out, that's sort of the plan. Um,
Mm,
so maybe you got to
but
be
see,
buddy
that's the
buddy.
opportunity for other people. This is why you got the open DeFi space. I don't need permission. I can go. This is why stuff being built on Ethereum right now, even though some of it's, I don't think so. There's real use cases right now, but at least the ideas behind it and the fact that people are tinkering and building, I'm like, it's fucking cool, man.
Super cool. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's sort of been my thesis around uh, permission networks versus not permission. Like we saw the same thing with a whole bunch of different types of networks, right? It's like we saw with well, even if you go as far back as mail, but you go back to like telephone, internet, mobile, email. Like a lot of people tried to build their own private email networks and internet networks,
Mm-hmm.
intranets, and things like that. And at the end, some of them were quite successful for a little bit, but after a while, once there was kind of enough mass adoption on the more open network, everybody went, well, crap, I better interface with the open network because that's where everybody's at.
It's simple osmosis. That's it.
Yeah. So I think like, that's sort of the challenge too, will be with a lot of these more permission networks is how do they bridge or become more open? Do they transition to becoming more open, or are they bridging, or do they just everybody migrates to something that is more open? But you need a bunch of factors. It's really complicated, right? You need good usability, liquidity, all sorts of stuff. You need to actually be able to use these tokens for stuff, and that's what we're
Yeah.
focused on.
I'm interested to see with like Libra if Libra is able to plug into like dexes, like you mentioned earlier, because the Binance Dex is Tendermint. They're not using Tendermint, but there's still ways to do it. You have cool like smart contract exchange like Uniswap, which is really cool.
Yeah,
Um, and then a lot of people, they have a lot of users globally on that. It'll be I'm interested to see like how do you build that network effect. If it's just highly regulated exchanges and the people you're trying to reach, forget about it.
yeah. I think we probably will see that stuff. I mean, we'll definitely see. I expect that we'll see once mainnet launches, we'll see some exchanges supporting Libra as well. Which, in terms of impact or benefit to the crypto community, obviously, like now if you have this massive on ramp, supposing they can get people into Libra, because they haven't really
Yeah.
fleshed out how that's going to happen. But if people are already in the crypto economy, right now, the portability of cryptocurrency, like that's one of the other major benefits, regardless of whether you're Bitcoin or stablecoin or whatever. The fact that you can do exchanges and swaps between all these currencies in a more permissionless, efficient way is kind of crazy. So I think you'll see a bit more of that, because that's been one of the challenges facing the crypto space is on ramping, right, and off
Yeah.
ramping.
I'm interested to see what happens with Tether. Now they have their own Leo token, right? Which is interesting. I haven't looked into the mechanics and their burn mechanism. Some people say
Yeah,
it's interesting. I haven't seen it, but let's say it's like, okay, people will trust Libra more, and Libra becomes dumb, and then you have the Gemini coin, Libra versus Gemini.
yeah,
I'm more interested in the psychological aspect, where it's like, okay, I got, let's say for people who are trading or holding some crypto, and they want to stop, they want to hedge against any volatility, and so they place the crypto into Libra, and then from Libra they sell it later on into whatever crypto. Do they track the data of that user?
yeah. I don't
So
know.
like what I mean. So let's say like Eric and Ameer are doing some Bitcoin trading, whatever it may be. We go to Libra, then we go back to Bitcoin 2-3 months later. Let's say, do they know it's you and I doing that? That's what I'm kind of interested in, is the identity aspect of that.
Well, I think in theory you could. I was talking with Matt Unger from iComply earlier this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking a little bit about this, and he said that that's actually the part that kind of worries him the most. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
come more from the identity space, right? And he said, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, because they do all the KYC AML stuff.
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, more crypto focused, giving them a bit of a plug, I guess. Uh, but they, yeah, we were chatting a bit this morning about how um, that is kind of the scary thing around, Facebook having access to all of your financial data and being able to monitor pretty much everything. But I think that is probably also not going to be just Facebook, right? Like the validator nodes, that's the interesting thing, is like anybody's running a validator can see all the history of everything. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
the transactions are open, but it comes down to who's the person or groups that actually know who made those transactions. And if it's all
Mm-hmm.
happening through Calibra, like Facebook's wallet, they're going to know exactly who it was. So now
Mm-hmm.
they can track all your transactions, and it's this crazy mesh net of everybody in there where their money moves. You
Mm-hmm.
know, playing devil's advocate, there's some efficiency gains and like really interesting stuff that can be done with that, but it's also a scary thought where
I
you
think
look
it's a
at.
net. I've been saying this since day one. Um, I knew about Facebook coming up with their own coin. I didn't know what it's called. I just figured they're gonna come out with something. I figured all the FANG companies will come out with one. I thought it would be
Yeah,
Amazon first, because they have Amazon
me
credit. I'm like,
too.
oh, there you go. You can
Me
make your
too.
Amazon credit into Amazon coin. Um, so it's like, let's say, hypothetically, all the FANGs, Google's, Amazon's, they come out with their own coins. I'm surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see Google. They want to compete. They got Google Play, or Google Pay. Sorry.
Do you think they wouldn't just
For,
join the consortium?
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. Depends on how much stake they see into that, and how much of their business do they care about that. And like, I don't know how, out of their whole market share, how much market share is Google Pay. I don't. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Um, but and plus their track records with social media platforms are horrendous. Google Plus was the biggest shit show I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
But it's gone now. Thank God. Goodbye, Google
yeah.
Plus.
Hey, at
Rest in
least they
peace.
managed to kill something that wasn't working. Takes some balls to be able to do that, especially when it's been running that
Yeah.
long.
Yeah. I don't know. I always say, like, people give too much credit to Google. To me, Google is just a glorified ad agency. If you really look at it, it's an engine. It was a better engine than Alta Vista when Alta Vista was king, and it's a better search engine. But if you look at where their profit is, and Peter Thiel talks about this, is just ads. They haven't really invented legitimate tech. Like, the two techs that I like they invented is Google Auth, the authenticator app,
Yeah,
and their Google Drive suites. Like, I
I
give them
think
credit.
I
Like, those
think
suite.
Maps too. I give them that.
For which one?
Google Maps.
Oh, Maps. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
they fucking bought my favorite map company. They killed it. It's not the same as before. They bought Waze.
Yeah. Yeah. It is
And
not
then
the
they
same.
started injecting their stuff into it. I'm like, yeah, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah.
But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, going back full circle. I think generally speaking, what all these FANG companies are going to do is just bring to the public light of what crypto is, and then because of them, they're going to put more of a validation of like this is where we're heading. And so now everyone's going to know. You're going to have billions of people like, what is this crypto thing? Whatever you want to call it, digital currency, crypto thing. And just
Yeah.
through sheer, I guess, their marketing campaigns, we're going to have such an influx of curious individuals wanting to know, like, what is this? Then they start diving in Bitcoin, Ethereum, this, that. I think the next 2, 3 years, we're going to have an influx of millions of users.
Yeah. I think so too. Uh, Crypto's a steep learning curve, though. I mean, like you have to know a lot of stuff, and I think our team has gone pretty deep, pretty quick. But we also had every one of our co-founders has 15 plus years building distributed systems and
I
web and
agree.
like
I
that. So
agree. But you look at places that Facebook is trying to go after. They definitely want to start hitting more of Asia, Africa, and India. I mentioned. But if
totally.
you look at, Charlie Munger has a good saying: "Show me the incentive, I show the outcome." And the reality is, the incentives. The majority of people who enter crypto, there's only one incentive: is to make money. The ICOs, people always bitch at ICO people raising money. I'm like, you do forget, for you to raise money, people need to give you money. So there's two at this party,
Yeah,
you
totally.
know. So Eric and I could be here all day, whatever, saying, "Hey, we're doing an IEO now, and it's for whatever, funny bunny coin. Give
Yeah,
me $10 million." People give me money. People give me money, but the only reason they give me money, they think they're gonna flip it, right? Because of liquidity event, because it's liquid. Um, and so if we're looking at the psychology in these places like India and Africa, listen, like anywhere in the world, people want to get rich. They want to make more money, right? From the incentive aspect. And so with stable coins, you can't do that. It's not like I buy Libra at $1 and making more money. Same thing like I'm buying DAI. I'm not making more DAI with DAI. DAI is supposed to be a stable coin unless I'm buying what's it called? The voting mechanism. But that's too complicated. People are not going to get into
yeah,
voting with tokens. But so what I think is going to happen is you're going to have an influx of people like, what is this thing? Oh, it's only a digital dollar. What do I do with it? I buy things, but how do I make money? You don't. You don't make money with Libra. Well, where do I make money? Oh, Bitcoin can go up. Oh, Ethereum can go up. And like most people, obviously, you're right. They're not going to do research. So guess what's going to happen? They're going to look at things that are single digits on like Coin Market Cap or something like that.
yeah.
Like I remember during the crazy, when was it? 2016 or 17 it was when
17.
we had the ICO craze. People are buying Ethereum and Litecoin because it's just cheaper. That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't because like,
Psychology.
oh, I know what. Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same thing with like blue chip stocks, right? It's the same thing you see in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Is like if it's less than $1, people go, "Oh man, this could have massive multiples." There's no fundamentals there all
Look
the
at
time.
the Ripple bot army, man, to the moon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's true.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I totally agree with it. That Libra and a bunch of stablecoins aren't there for making money unless you're very sophisticated and you're like in arbitrage and all sorts of stuff,
Yeah.
right? Um, but where I think where I think they're going to push, I think they've even kind of hinted at this, even if they haven't said it straight up, is like remittances. And likely you look at where is their biggest WhatsApp usage, it's in India. So they're probably going to
Mm-hmm.
push for remittance in India. Now there's weird stuff happening around crypto regulation in India with them like banning crypto outright. So where does this fit? Like that's why I think a lot of this is super early. But the big benefit for a lot of people in countries, and this is what we've been kind of focused on, is like people where their fiat currency is like legitimately failing. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us in the crypto space that are crypto believers like see the systemic risk of the Keynesian economic policies we've been following for 80, 90 years, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of history, right? And how much the incentives are misaligned and how we've been printing money and all this sort of stuff. And you can't keep doing that for forever. I
Well, I
mean,
have the stats here. Like just 2019, the top ones: Venezuela, 10 million inflation,
Yeah.
Zimbabwe 73, Sudan 49, Argentina 43, Iran 37, South Sudan 24, Liberia 22, Yemen 20, Angola 17, Turkey 17.
Yeah.
Imagine waking up and quarter of your buying power was gone overnight.
Yeah, I mean, totally. When we pitch this, I
It's
mean,
like
we get a
fuck.
first row seat because our one of our employees is down there, and that's how we jump through this and we see this. He said last month inflation was 4%, right? So,
Jesus.
so what we're seeing down in Argentina specifically, where we see more access, is like people are not using credit cards so much, and a lot of merchants stop accepting credit cards because the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing that people don't know is, and I guess like I kind of hinted at this earlier, was you know blockchains are already pretty good. Like people get all hyped about the speed and cost, but could it be better? Absolutely. I mean, DLTs and stuff like Libra that are uh, maybe more centralized but faster speeds are going to provide a better user experience. But I would argue it's actually just more of a user experience and liquidity issue than it is a tech issue at the moment. Because when you understand how credit cards work, the settlement finality takes anywhere from 1 to 30+ days, depending on where you are in the world, right?
Yeah.
Brazil's leading or second largest payment processor pays out net 40 days. That's unheard of
Wow.
here. In Argentina, they get paid net 30. So that's why
Mm.
a lot of people have stopped taking credit cards there, because when you have 10% devaluation in a month,
So what are they taking? What's the primary
cash and debit.
cash and debit? Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing that we're seeing is like people are now though trying to protect their wealth in anything, right? So it's like gold or US dollars, primarily US dollars.
Everyone
Uh,
wants US dollars.
yeah. Yeah, which that's kind of how we were thinking. This is very similar to, I think, cryptocurrency reserve, a stable coin. I think they're not out, so now they're going to be in some trouble. I think they're taking a long time to kind of get moving. But the way that we thought stable coins would kind of evolve is through three phases, where it's first phase we're already kind of in, where it's like fiat backed 1-for-1 digital US dollars, because that's the global reserve that everybody wants right now. It's how everything's priced, for better or worse. And then the second phase is a bit more decentralization of collateral, and that seems to be where Libra is kind of going. It's like adding different commodities, securities, and other currencies. The interesting thing is they're starting there. So that may work really well, but that also might make it a little bit weird, because it might be really hard for people to price things. And that's sort of actually one of the
Yeah.
arguments for why I personally don't see a likely scenario. I think it's possible, but very slim, that Bitcoin becomes like a global reserve currency.
You don't
Just
see Bitcoin as a hedge?
No, I think it's absolutely a hedge against fiat failing. I think that like ultimately you're basically banking on the whole uh, global economy shitting itself. So it's a great hedge, and that's why I personally invest in
Yeah,
buying
but
Bitcoin.
you're saying more or less that you don't see people using Bitcoin as a means of payment.
Yeah, and even I think one of the things, because it's so volatile, it's hard for people to put a lot of their wealth in Bitcoin because there's so much volatility. And it's also really hard for them to want to spend something that could be worth twice as much
But
next
don't you
month.
think Bitcoin, let's say you get what's the terminology they use? Like hyper Bitcoinization?
Bitcoinization. Yeah,
Yeah. Let's say we fast forward, we get to that point. There's going to be a hormetic level where Bitcoin is stable at
for sure.
whatever that's, let's say random number, 100K, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Don't you think then and there people will then hold longer? Because you're right. Places like, well, Venezuela is unique considering their inflation is ridiculous. But let's say places that's like 15%, give or take. Don't you think it's still safer for them to hold in Bitcoin than their country's fiat, like long term?
It's long, yeah, on the time horizon, like longer term,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think so. So I think if we unpack this a little bit more, one of the things that was bothering me for a while, and I had to reread, say, Amoose's book, Bitcoin Standard, right? So I read it,
Mm-hmm.
I think like a year ago. I skimmed it and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But I had to actually go back and reread it thoroughly and be like, with new knowledge, because there were a couple of things that were bothering me. And one of them was, will people spend Bitcoin, period?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the big things for me was, it's a deflationary asset. Will people spend a deflationary asset? And it's like, okay, well, I had to do a whole bunch of economic theory, go read history, read Safe's book, a bunch of stuff, right? And so I got over that hurdle. Like, people will spend
So you went down the rabbit hole, the Mises Institute.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. So people will spend a deflationary asset. But I mean, hey, if we flip from a pretty heavy inflationary ecosystem or economy that we live in now around the world, and then flip to a deflationary one, there's going to be a hell of a lot of pain for some people, mostly the poor people, unfortunately. But the one thing that's so I've got over that hurdle. Like, people will do it given a different time horizon, or a significant enough time horizon. There might be some bumps along the way, but people would do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big thing for me is, like, how do we stabilize the price of Bitcoin? And the three possible scenarios that I can come up with so far are, one of them that was presented to me that I thought was kind of interesting was, like, maybe you have a whole nation decide to like accumulate Bitcoin, and then eventually like just flip and say, like, hey, our currency is denominated in Satoshis.
Mm-hmm.
That might do it. That might trigger a massive buy, obviously, because like the price is determined based on supply and demand. We have a
Mm-hmm.
price floor based on how much it costs to manufacture, let's say, mine Bitcoin. But price would like skyrocket and eventually would find some equilibrium, I think. So that's maybe a possibility. The other one, I think, is right now, one of the challenges is there's a huge concentration of wealth with Bitcoin, far worse than fiat at the moment. And so you basically need, the reason why it can be so volatile is because a lot of people can manipulate it because the market is less mature. So you'd need people to start to sell their Bitcoin, or give it away, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think unless there's some hidden trapdoor built into Bitcoin code base, I don't see that happening. Because if that was going to happen, I would have expected to see more of a sell-off during this massive market downturn, and we didn't really see that. So the third one that I think is maybe a bit more likely in the short term is whether we see futures keep the price a bit more stable. Because ultimately, like, what Safe is kind of arguing for in his book is that, like, in order for things to be used as currency, you need to start pricing things in Bitcoin. And right now, I see that as a pretty hard hurdle, or big hurdle for people to get over, given the volatility. So there's nothing.
No, I agree. I agree. Like I said earlier, to me, I view, at least currently with the narrative, for me, the value prop of Bitcoin is not the price. That's secondary. For me, the value prop is censorship resistant peer to peer.
Yeah, 100%.
And eventually, once we get Schnorr signatures and other technologies evolved into Bitcoin, we'll have even more privacy. And so for me, it's a fact that no one can take this from me. That's the value prop for me. Now, what happens with the price, that's a secondary benefit of having it. And so places like, I
But I
thought it
think that
was Mauricio.
price is sort of just a function of the fact that we're still in the US dollar economy right now, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
I've been thinking about, like, how do you migrate over to Bitcoin? And it might take quite a long time, and maybe Libra is a really interesting step to get there, because
Yeah,
people move from being US dollar denominated global currency to
yeah.
now this basketed one. And the way that I've been kind of envisioning, like, a collateral basket is actually, like, kind of stealing from from Pompiano, is that, like, he's always been saying to a lot of the people that the institutions that he's pitching, is like, the asymmetric upside of
It's massive.
Bitcoin is massive. And so if you put 1% of your portfolio, or 2%, or whatever your risk profile is, in it, sure, it might go to zero, you might lose it all, right? But 1 or 2% out of a portfolio loss is not nothing to worry about. But you could have 1,000x return. Like, if this does end up being a good hedge against fiat failing, then you basically have made a monster return for your risk profile. And so that's kind of how I
It's
was
also a
expecting.
non-correlated asset, at least as we know right now.
So far, yeah, it looks like that. So I think that's the way I've been sort of expecting to see a collateral basket structured for a stablecoin as well, in that it would include, one or more crypto assets in a small percentage right now, but that would provide some security around the hedge that fiat currencies fail. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so far, there's no discussion about that with Libra 2, which I think, maybe they intentionally left that out. Maybe they haven't even thought of it. But I think that is an interesting uh, take, because I think you're totally right. Like, the value, a lot of people criticize Bitcoin uh, and other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin specifically, around it being not useful, or it's not like gold, or doesn't have this intrinsic value. And what they're not realizing is like there's definitely a trust system, in that people need to believe, or a belief system that people need to believe it has value. But that's with any money. It's like that. It doesn't matter what
Mm-hmm.
is the underlying asset. Everybody has to believe it has value. So the true value of Bitcoin is its censorship resistance. And so far, we take that for granted in North America. But there's a lot of people in other countries that feel that pain like every day. Iran's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty good example. Saudi can be a pretty good example. Like a lot of those people, um, China is like a great example, right? Of people that are oppressed by government, and they don't have any option, and Bitcoin gives them an option. And so the value of that is still pretty hard to quantify. It's like, how many people need that censorship resistance? And 10 years from now,
Well,
that could
I
be
think
a lot of people.
I think I think also if you look at Ray Dalio's micro macro economic cycle,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I've been
especially
paying
it
a lot
gets
of
worse and
attention to
worse.
that.
Yeah, it gets
Yeah,
worse and worse. Especially they're jacking up QE now.
yeah.
Negative interest rates are coming, so it's like we're so fucked that we have to suppress everything. So you're extending the bubble from
Oh, yeah,
2008,
yeah, I
and
100% think
so
Ray Dalio is saying, like,
man,
he expects a massive. I agree with his thesis 100%. The only thing I don't, or 99%, the only thing I don't agree with is his timescale. He was saying he expects a massive global recession within the next 2 years, probably spurred
yeah,
on by countries in Latam defaulting on their IMF debt, Argentina, right? Like, it's likely going to come from there, or kick-started from there. Uh, I think, though, we probably have a bit more leash than that, and the reason being is because the U.S. dollar is the global currency, and a lot of people are still very unaware of um, the money printing, and it's just, I think there's more leash than 2 years, but I could see it happening definitely with the next 5 to 10, like in my lifetime, 100%.
oh yeah, for sure it's gonna happen in our lifetime. And I think that Black Swan event is gonna be because the last Black Swan event in '08, that's when Bitcoin came around.
Yeah,
Like whether it was Hal Finney or a group of people around Hal Finney, I don't know. I don't spend too much time wondering who or they
yeah,
Satoshi
yeah.
was. Um,
So I have a question for
they,
you around this. Maybe like
yeah,
in the space longer than I have. Um, and this is just totally hypothetical, but do you think that they were planning that around 2008? Do you think 2008 spawned it,
no,
or
I if you look at if you look at Bitcoin Talk forum
yeah,
and you look at the white paper and you look at how they put all different technologies together because what they're the Bitcoin blockchain it's a combination of different stacks of tech together.
yeah,
I think they were working on it for a while,
I think so too. Yeah, but I'm
and I
I'm
think
wondering if it's just like kind of coincidence that it came together like right in 2008, or if it was, you know
there's two
building
answers for this.
building towards that, with that whole, seeing what was happening, kind of like you and I are going, like, the world's fucked. Like, QE's on a runaway train. Like, debt to GDP ratios are absurd. Yeah.
Yeah, there's two answers for that. One is timed, but then again, how do you time the Black Swan event? Some people knew about it, so you could. So we could say that there people saw the writing on the wall. Or my thesis is just like any startup, it's very hard to time the markets. And if you look at the most successful startups, it's all about timing. It's not really, if you and I VC fund a company, we raise money, and it's not like I'm smarter than you. You know what I mean? It's my timing was
Yeah.
better and my execution was better. We had the same tech. It's just timing and execution. It's not the money defining. It's not like you're some kind of super genius compared to me, right? Or like vice versa. I just believe through sheer luck that the timing was right. That's it. Like they came at the right time and the Black Swan event happened, and then fuck, people started reading about it, and people started having they were despaired and pissed off, and people are losing their homes and foreclosure, and the price was the dollar was dropping down, and you got this thing called peer-to-peer cash.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of crazy. It's definitely timing related because they're not. Bitcoin definitely wasn't the first peer-to-peer cash. It was the
No,
first
there's a bunch of other ones
one that
like
kind of brought everything together at kind of the right with the right tech, sort of the right mechanics at the right time, and it managed to start to you know get adoption. But it's interesting how long the adoption curve still took, really, to
it
start.
takes a long time. Like Adam Back, he's the inventor of hash cash. Like I think that was like fuck, like mid 90s if I remember.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like a whole decade earlier than Bitcoin. And obviously that's referenced to in Bitcoin Talk forum, and Adam's part of that. And I think it's just timing, man. I think there's a bunch of people trying to do stuff about a decade beforehand, and finally through osmosis and trial and error and people reading other like scientists, right? People reading other people's works, and group of people came together. My hypothesis, it was a group of people as opposed to one person. They
yeah.
came together, and the group of people might not even know who they were. Like I don't think so. The group of people knew each other. I think they're just part of this online group, and they created the Bitcoin white paper. Rest is history, man.
Hmm.
To me, it's one of the greatest human inventions of all time. Like, but one thing they did purposely, which is fucking genius. So they must have understood human psychology and mythology and religion very well because they took no ownership of the white paper. They took no ownership of the project. They just left it go. They left it for the disciples, and they left it from a grassroots movement. So
Yeah,
there's no figurehead. The original Genesis block, I don't what it is, it like a couple billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin is locked up over there. Everyone can view it. You can see it. Um, so from a psychological, mythological standpoint, it's like that's fucking terrific. Like they knew exactly what they're doing from that aspect.
yeah. I mean, that's the fun thing, kind of about Bitcoin, is that because there's so much like mystere around it. I guess you don't really know. Like it could be sometimes like you go. We've seen this in startups too. You're like you make a decision based on what you're thinking, or you just push something out there, and then it turns into a runaway train later, and it wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily planned that way.
But this
But
is what makes Bitcoin so different than anything else is like it doesn't have a figurehead.
yeah, and I think that's why it's so powerful in terms of you know its key value, right? Censorship
It doesn't have a
resistant.
figurehead. It doesn't have a foundation. It doesn't have a Switzerland non-for-profit. It doesn't have any of that stuff. And you had people sinking millions of dollars without any blueprints, capital in first to mine Bitcoin. It's like you had one of the largest opt-in startups, let's call it a startup or a movement in
Yeah,
history. Like it's all opt-in. There's no leadership. There's no one telling you what to do. It's like here it is. Like either you can join or you don't have to join. It's up to you.
yeah, yeah, and I think that is outside of censorship resistance. I think that's the other big thing, is that it gives you the choice, which currently you don't have with any of your money. Like you don't have the choice to
Yeah.
be your own bank or not, right? in our current monetary system, and Bitcoin has changed that. And it's a super powerful thing. So we'll see kind of what happens. I guess
Yeah.
bringing that back to what we were talking about before with Libra, I mean, exciting time to be alive, man. I think like we'll
Mm-hmm.
see.
Mm-hmm.
We might have a scenario where you end up having a big kind of corporate oligopoly that creates a new next generation of money. And maybe Bitcoin's a backing part of it. Maybe Bitcoin is for people who want to opt in to being their own bank or having some of their own money. I think at the very least, like if Libra doesn't get shut down and gets adoption, if it stays in open enough that people can run their own nodes, you will see it be a conduit to other cryptocurrencies that are more censorship resistant. So
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Eric, if people want to get a hold of you, learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way?
yeah, so I guess I didn't even plug myself, co-founder of Badali.
Plug
So
away, bro. This is the time.
there you go, Badali.com. So we're building the infrastructure to actually make crypto usable for payments. Um, you can find our Twitter handle is Badali, BIDALIHQ on Twitter. Mine is Kryski, KRYSKI. Hit me up, any questions, concerns, think I'm an idiot, go for it.
All right. Thanks, brother. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Mir.